Welcome on my channel. I'm Katu and I share about all things related to tarot with a queer and feminist perspective. I share mostly in French, but every now and then I do like to share a video in English, and there's a playlist somewhere with all my videos in English. This one is long overdue. I started a series on tarot and inclusivity somewhere in June this year, and the last video that I wanted to make on that topic is about my very favorite inclusive decks. I'm so excited to be talking about my very favorite inclusive tarot decks. I do invite you though, if you haven't done it before, to go watch my initial thoughts on tarot and inclusivity, because you might be surprised what my thoughts are about inclusivity. I don't think it goes that well into the mainstream ideas of inclusivity, and I'm trying to reshape it or incite or ignite a conversation around inclusivity in tarot communities. It's a bit less complacent towards capitalism mainly, but also all other systems of oppression. For my second video about my favorite inclusive tarot decks, you're gonna see the very best, the ones that I love and adore. So I'm just looking at them and like I'm feeling a surge of affection towards them. Yes, I do have a relationship with my tarot decks, of course. I want to start with the Fifth Spirit Tarot, just because it's very special. It's a non-binary deck. A mass market version is going to be available later this year, which of course is nice because it makes it more affordable. On the other hand, I'm rather skeptical about the production quality of everything that's published by Hay House. It might still be time to grab some of those indie decks if you want to, by Charlie Claire Burgess. Look at that. I'm especially fond of the major arcana and also the court cards. I have to say that the knowledge and everything queer that has been put into this deck is very touching for me, especially with the book as well, which is one of my favorite books about tarot, without a doubt. I very much enjoy it. The minors, I like that they are quite simple. There are not too much things. It's one of those decks that's for the minors. Try to get to the essence of a card, and I can appreciate that most of the time. But with this deck, I find that I struggle to use it because of this relative simplicity of the minors. I wouldn't know how to explain it, but yeah, nevertheless, it's one of my very favorite decks. It's always somewhere near me where I can use it, at least for my own personal readings. I don't like reading for others with it. I have no idea why. It's something about the minor that it's not so inspiring for me and for my intuition and for my clairs. So because of the way that I do read tarot, there seems like to be sort of a missing something in this deck for me to use it. What I like in the major is the obvious effort to revisit everything we know about tarot, whilst also being very knowledgeable and somehow respectful. You have the astrological and elemental correspondences that are well presented in the major arcana. So anyway, enough with the talking. Let me just say it is one of my very favorite inclusive decks. Another classic, of course, the This Might Hurt Tarot. This is a deck that relies and is inspired by the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition. So it's very conventional in that way, but it is also very queer, very inclusive, and not in a way, not in a lazy way. You know, some decks, they try to modernize the classical imagery, but it's not very inspired. It don't bring that much in order to modernize it. This one is very relatable. It's not trying too much to be like the perfect inclusive deck. And personally, that's what I like about it. I like that there's a kind of overrated word coming. There's a kind of authenticity in it, a kind of sincerity that I really like, and that I don't find so much in some of the other decks, inclusive decks. Well, go back to my first video if you want to hear more of my thoughts on that topic. I love this Seven of Wands. It is one of my very favorite Seven of Wands, I have to say. Some cards are a bit too classical for me. I don't do so well with Rider-Waite-Smith clones, or in this case, very inspired by the RWS decks. But there's something, what I especially love about this deck is that it is a deck that I can trust when I read for other people. It never fails me. Because if I'm not in a very intuitive mood, or I don't have such a great connection for a reading or something, this one, it can read very easily using classical tarot interpretation and, you know, like something more mechanical, that you don't have to dive deep into your connections and intuition. Sometimes you don't necessarily give bad readings, but in my case, I mean, it's more like, I don't know, conventional, yeah, mechanical. I'm gonna give the meanings of each card and see how they relate with each other and everything. And this one never fails to give me what I need when I'm in this kind of mood. So it's also a very good deck to be using when I don't feel very open to my psychic abilities or my intuitions. This is one of my most modified deck, so it's a very tiny little deck coming out of this bag, whereas the original edition is very big with big frame around it. It's the Aura Tarot deck. Well, I can show you briefly what I have done with this deck. I washi taped the name of the card and name of the person that we can see, historical, feminist or female figures that we see on it. But I mean, inspiring women and less inspiring women, but that's kind of the complexity of history and the complexity of tarot as well. So that's pretty interesting. Let me show you some of the pictures in the book so you have a better idea of how it works. So this is obviously the mass market edition. There's an indie version. To be honest with you, it's not a deck that I use that often for my readings, and I use it to learn about history. I did study history, by the way, at the university, and also a lot of gender studies, and I worked during 11 years in the field of gender studies. So it's one of the topics that I love, obviously, and I have a very good time learning about these women in this deck. I love the collages as well. It might not be a deck that I use a lot, but it's definitely making it to the top of my list of inclusive tarot decks. There was sort of a mishmash in my previous video with the liminal 11 decks that I wanted to present. I wanted to keep the new chapter tarot for this video, which I didn't. I made a mistake mistake and presented it in the last video. So for this one, I'm supposed to show you the Lunar Soul Tarot, but I lent it to someone. So until I get it back, I cannot present it. And it's just okay. You can look it up. I have a review in French somewhere if you want to learn more about this deck. I haven't used this one a lot so far. There's a very winter vibe for me because maybe it's very subtle in the color palette and everything that's presented, very minimalist. So I think that's the reason why I'm keeping it for the winter. It's the mass market version. Hay House. Terrible cardstock quality, sadly, very sadly, because for me, as someone with a chronic illness, EDS, that doesn't help me to handle the bigger piles. Clearly it's a problem. It's a real problem for me. I'm really sad about that. I mean, it's not the cheapest of indie decks are published by Hay House. They're about 30 euros. There's no reason why they should be so printed in that way. So anyway, this deck intends to be queer, inclusive. No, it doesn't. This deck intends to be genderless. So in this way, it is very, very inclusive. The way that the creator made this deck inclusive is by limiting the participation of people. Every now and then you would see a hand or something that will remind you that humans are somewhere around, but there's not so much. So, okay, why not? See, hands, things like that, and things that will not let gender become too over-present in your readings. Where it does a great job as well is by renaming the gendered major cards and also the court cards. The crown is for, I want to say, king. I'm not used to this deck. Apprentice is obviously for pages. Champion is for the knights. And keeper is for the queen. So that's a very nice way to avoid gender in the court cards. As you can see here with the where you would usually find the Emperor card, we have the Defender, so there's no gender here. The Revealer is the usual High Priestess. I very much enjoy that. And when you can see here someone, impossible to tell a gender from it. Because I haven't been using it so far, it's hard for me to quickly review this deck. I want to say that there are a lot of decks that don't really have people on it, so would I use them as an example of an inclusive deck? It depends, and depends on the effort that's made, on the intentions that are made towards yeah, changing the names and the imagery and everything. For example, here I have the Spacious Tarot with the Child of Pentacles for the page, the Guardian for the Queen. The name of the majors is the same though, and let me show you. We have Elder for here, the Kings, and I'm missing, I guess, the Explorer. Here is an Explorer for the Knights. In the expansion pack, the representation of the zodiacal signs especially are not gendered at all. It's not something that you can see that often actually. There's always something in the imagery, in the use of, I don't know, flowers or, you know, care that would imply something gendered behind the signs, and I like that it's not something that's very present here. And here the major arcana, as you can see here with the Emperor, even though the name is the same, it's still very, there's something conscious about the representation of gender or the gender neutrality of those decks that I really enjoy. Now I'm not gonna be talking about them all here, but there's a special mention for me for the Spacious Tarot, which I adore. The Numinous Tarot is the first edition, and I have to say that the card quality looks much better now, so just so you know. I would love to have the linen version of this deck, but because I don't use it a lot, I'm never going to buy it, I guess. I'm still going on with this one, even though I'm not 100% satisfied with the glossy, rather glossy. It's not too glossy though. Well, anyway, what I wanted to say here is that some decks seem to make a choice between changing the imagery, and for example here in the Fifth Spirit Tarot to have it as non-binary, and keeping the names so that it's not too much to digest. And for some people who are new to tarot or who have not spent so much time learning tarot, it can be a lot to take in and the imagery is very creative or new and the names are changed. So my interpretation of it, when sometimes creators choose to keep either the names or some elements of the traditional Waite-Smith imagery, is that they don't want us to get too lost, and I get it, honestly. I get it. Here with the Numinous, we have a conscious effort to rename a lot of things, like here Explorer for Knights, Bells for Swords. It's absolutely gender neutral, which I adore. Let me show you some of the cool renamed cards. Mystic is for Kings and Tomes or for Pentacles. Candles are for Wands. Creator is for Queens. Here are some of the Majors. Vials are for Cups. Love it. Major. I love the crafty, DIY, creative, artistic energy of the tomes especially. Do I need to mention something else? Love this Lovers card. We have the Nurturer for the Empress. The Visionary is the Hierophant. I don't know where it is, but I can tell you. The Emperor is, I don't remember. The Diviner is the High Priestess. The Magician is, I don't remember right now, but it's very creative. As you can tell, I don't use it that much, simply because I love the work that is done on inclusivity in the representations. There's something about the artwork and the representations that, even though I love and appreciate, they're just not really my universe. I don't see myself so much in it. I can tell that sometimes it speaks to some people, and I do not hesitate to use it for readings when I can feel that it would be a match. Sometimes it is for me too, but it's not necessarily a deck that I can project myself into for some reason that I can't really explain. It's just not my type of imagery, I guess. This is my indie version, and I modified it. I also have the mass market edition in pockets. I'm going to show you this one, even though sometimes it might be difficult to recognize the cards. This is the 8 of Swords. 9 of Wands, 9 of Swords, 2 of Cups, 6 of Pentacles, the World, 7 of Pentacles. Now, in terms of inclusive tarot decks, this post-apocalyptic deck is just amazing. Obviously, it's one of my favorite decks. It's not one of the decks that I use the most, maybe because there's so much going on each card, but oh my gosh, do I love this deck. it's one of the very few decks that just does tick all the boxes of what makes an inclusive tarot deck for me. I can see myself. I can see the ones that I love in this deck. Here you have the Knight of Pentacles, Page of Swords, Seven of Swords, Seven of Cups. That's one of the other things about this deck. I've never heard someone talk about it anywhere before, but maybe some people have. But I find that some cards are very Thoth inspired, which to me is very interesting. This one especially, if you look at the structure of the card and the symbols, I don't have a Thoth deck just here to compare, but I find that really, really nice also for the tarot studies. Obviously, in this modified version, I don't have the keywords, but you have keywords and you also have the astrological correspondences. It's also one of the qualities of this deck to be able to very subtly bring a lot of tarot tradition and knowledge to it, and then going around and just fucking with it seriously because it's so punk. There are lots of famous people in the queer community that you might recognize on the cards, but the choice that was made with this deck is to not make an allusion to who is on which card. This is the Emperor, and it's the Teacher in this deck, if I'm not mistaken. Might be. No, I'm not. It's the Teacher. So very few of the major cards have another name. So the Teacher for the Emperor here, and the Emperor is the Teacher, and we have the Messenger for the Hierophants, and that's all I can think of. Maybe there's another. Oh, I think this one, the Hanged one, is Suspension. Here we have the Messenger for the Hierophant. I should have brought my other version of this deck here. It's hard for me to tell. I can be very, very bad with my modifications. The actual deck looks nothing like it. It is the Many Queens Tarot. It was way too big for me, so I had to drastically cut across the cards. In some cards you can hardly tell, and in others you're missing elements, and you're also missing the name of the cards, like we do here with the Hierophants. Also, because I was so deep into it, I also took this opportunity to color my deck, because that's what I do. You might or might not like it. To me, it's very respectful of the spirit of this deck and the creativity of this deck, so I'm totally not regretful. I wrote a review of the Many Queens Tarot for the Little Red Tarot website. If you want to read my impressions about it, it's pretty obvious that in terms of representativity and queerness, it's high level. I'm always very impressed whenever I take it out of its bag and I enjoy the images. Very impressed by what it's done and how it's infused with feminist and queerness and feminist. That's all we need, don't we? Back to mass market decks, we have the excellent Queer Tarot. It still smells of printing, and I like this. Okay, this is a Rider-Waite-Smith clone. Or at least that's what I define as a clone. I know that not everybody has the same understanding of what a clone of the RWS is, but for me, it is. Except it's real people and it's actual queer people on each card. As I've said before in this video, I'm not I'm not such a big fan of RWS clone or inspired decks. To me, querying tarot and our understanding and our interpretation of tarot further than the images is also something that will allow us to, what do I want to say? The images are important, but they're just a jumping board for us as tarot reader in order for us to come up with more inclusive interpretations and dreams and words and power and all of that. And when decks are too RWS inspired, somehow they don't give me what I need in order to bring this empowerment and this riots and this revolution to tarot. So somehow it's difficult for me, but I do love this deck. I love the colors, I love all the queer and LGBTQI plus references, with the flags, with the colors, with other symbols everywhere. It's really, really beautiful. It's a big tarot deck, to be sure, but because of the amazing card quality, it doesn't bother me. So that's nice, because we can really enjoy the image. Okay. Oh, this smell. Look at me, I'm tired. When I'm tired, all of my experience of my decks, that I'm trying to share with you, is very tactile and sensual, but I don't know what you can make of it. Okay. The Herbcrafter's Tarot with new names for the card cards. I'm not going to read it. Why? Because I have no clue how to pronounce things in Spanish, and I want to be respectful, especially of the creator. There are not so many humans on this plant herb deck, but it just gives me that inclusive and without trying too much vibe, you know. Look at me, I'm tired. It's the end of the video. I don't have much to say, but please know that this deck is a really cool, inclusive deck. The artist behind the artwork is also the creator of the Gaian tarot. Now, I don't have the production nor the price of this deck, so it's not on my wish list. I do have it as an app on my phone. Now, I'm using my phone to film, so I cannot show you. But the Gaian tarot is definitely making it to my inclusive tarot deck best of the best lists. Sadly, I cannot show you because I don't have it in paper. I do have the app, and I do recommend it. Or I do recommend checking it out, at least. I don't have it here, and I don't want to go to the other room, but I can see that in my video in French I did mention the Kawaii Tarot, the latest Kawaii Tarot, because there are a lot of cute fat animals and I think it's very inclusive. But it's not really a joke, but it's kind of a joke. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be on my list, so I'm just mentioning it, putting a link if you want to see what it looks like, but I'm not gonna go to the other room to show you. Seriously, it's more like tongue-in-cheek kind of things. Sometimes there are expressions in English that I don't know if I get or not, how to use it. I was happy to show you my collection of inclusive tarot decks, and to finish for now this series on inclusivity in tarot. When I came to tarot 6 years ago, it was really a quest for me to find more inclusive tarot decks, and I really wanted to have them when they were there, like the Slow Holder Tarot or the Next World Tarot. And now there's so much going on that it's difficult to keep up And it's also not necessary, because we have a choice and we can find inclusive tarot decks that really speak to us, and we don't have to go to those that maybe we don't like so much, but just because they are there, and the rest is all so wide, so thin, so straight, so able-bodied, and so on and so on. So I'm happy for that change. I'm happy we have a chance to access to more inclusive tarot deck. But accessing more inclusive tarot decks also means that now it's really just marketing. It's just capitalism selling us what it knows that we want. And I think it's important, at least for me, in the way that I curate my collection, to be able to find some balance, I guess, in what decks I'm attracted to or not. Oh. Did I? Oh, the Rainbow Tarot. Was it in my first video? I'm not sure. Oh, wait. Wait, I almost forgot this deck because it arrived in my collection. Someone gifted it to me after I made the initial videos in French. It's the Rainbow Tarot by So Lazo. My gosh, this one is a good one. Oh, it's a great one. It's Tarot de Marseille inspired for the major, and Wade Smith inspired for the minors. But look at this. Oh my. Rainbow, because every single card is in a specific color. It's queer, diverse, original, beautiful, very high quality, with the holographic edges that we love. My cat is here, very disturbed by my high-pitched noises, so I know it's time for me to stop. Ah, the Rainbow Tarot. Ah, this one is such a some fresh air to the tarot, I think. Oh, look at this Six of Cups. Queen of Wands. Six of Swords. Very classical for some cards, like here, the Eight of Swords. And still there is something. Look at this Four of Wands. I don't know. I love the majors and I hate the Tarot de Marseille. But this one is doing really great. First, it gives the name. Whereas in usual Marseille, this one would be nameless because we're scared of death. Stupid Marseille. Anyway, it's time for me to stop complaining and go. Thank you.